Wala, pwede. Oo. So, Cora, at your end, ano? You're recording it?
Yeah.
Oo. Okay.
Baka konting intro. Either ikaw o si...
Oo.
Wag na, tayo lang naman eh.
Oo, hindi, para maano rin naman, hindi lahat ng mga bata kilala ka fully. Actually, ako nga, pagkakakilala ko sa'yo, dito na sa laban ng masa eh. Although, as independent, no? Doon sa mga independents. But,
Lahat tayo nang galing doon sa cult. One time or another.
So siguro, dagdagan mo naman, Chibu, say something about yourself muna. para mas,
Dating member ako
like
ng cult.
what you're doing now, anong ginagawa mo ngayon, ano yung gusto mong i-reveal na dati ganun ka, dati ganito ka, yung hanggang gusto mo lang.
Checkered pa.
I-reveal.
Record!
Mahirap to. Mabibisto.
Parang
Maraming skeleton sa closet.
Oo. Patay. Tuwan-tuwa si Cora eh.
Yung yung legitimate lang.
Yung legit lang.
Oo naman.
Nag-umpisa ako pumunta sa Latin America noong 1992. Umpisa sa Guatemala, tapos Mexico. Bilang nagtatrabaho ako part-time bilang periodista na cover ako ng Guerra Civil sa Guatemala at saka yung rebellion sa Southern Mexico. Tapos noong 2002 na-transfer ako sa South American desk. Kaya puro South America na. At pag hindi ako nagtatrabaho bilang kasi contractual din ako. Precariat. Kaya kailangan magtrabaho. Nagtuturo ako. Meron akong rolling contract. 2 semester lang sa 1 taon o kaya 1 semester at saka summer. Kaya yung 4 na buwan na sa America Latina. At lumagpak ako sa Spanish. Nilagpak ako ni Señora Respacochaga ng Spanish sa UP. Pero
ay, parang kilala ko pa ito.
Ang buhay nga naman, binawian ako, tinapon ako sa Latin America. Kaya napilitan ako matutong magsalita ng Kastila. Tama na ba yun? Nagtuturo din. Nag-retire ako sa University of Alberta. Ang tinuturo, nasa Latin American Studies program ako. Tapos nag-lecturer din ako sa UP ng Latin American Studies. Paminsan-minsan. Tama na siguro yun. Ano na? Establish na ba yung legitimacy ko?
Pero anyway, bago tayo magtuloy,
gusto niyo magtanong, mabuti pa.
Legit.
Teka muna, Chibu, bago tayo mag-start, gusto ko lang sabihin yung mga nandito para kilala mo din. So ako, nandito si Cora.
So far, lahat na nagsalita, kilala ko.
Miel.
Galil.
Si Galil. Sino si...
Si Angging.
Sa W, sir yan. Si Angging, biglang, nangyari? Na-disconnect si Angging. Pero babalik malamang yon. Si Tin, nandito. Sino yung W Soriano?
Si Weng.
Si Weng.
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 Okay.
Si Rowena.
Okay. So, yon. Kanina meron ding MDG. Hindi ko alam sino yun eh. Anyway, so yun muna yung mga nandyan. Sige, so, pwede na. Established na siya, Cora, no? Okay na, Chibu.
Okay na.
Parang connected, diba?
Ang anunsyo dito, conversation. Ha? Hindi ako magbibigay ng lecture. Eh. Ano ito? Two-way flow ng communication. Na hindi ito...
Conversations. Daldalan.
Umpisa natin doon sa commonality ng pandemic. Dahil wala naman nakaiwas dito sa pandemic. Pero magsalita ko dalawang English at saka yung ating wika, no? Okay lang sa inyo?
Yep. No problem.
Pwede natin sabihin talaga na halos lahat ng gobyerno sa Latin America hindi handa harapin itong COVID-19. Sa umpisa, ang karamihan, binabaliwala nila, dina-downplay nila ang seriousness nitong COVID-19. Halos kapareho nung ginagawa ni Duterte. Sabi nila, sasampulin daw niya yung COVID-19. Wala naman pagkaiba yun sa mga sinasabi ni Jair Bolsonaro sa Brazil. Ganun din. Ayaw man lang mag-maskara ni si Bolsonaro. Kaya pati siya nadali, pati mga ministro niya. Anyway, yung response ng most government, yung sporadic, unorganized, yung alam lang nila, yung use of face mask, social distancing, merong konting testing. Hindi lahat. Chile ng testing, pero yung karamihan walang testing. Halos kapareho na sa atin. Ang pinakamatinding tama ay Brazil. 6.97 million ang kaso nila last count. 6.97 million. Pangalawa lang sa US sa karamihan. At sa daming yon, 183,000 ang namatay. Kapareho din sa US, second only. No? Ang description ng isang doktor ng Brazil sa ginagawa ng gobyerno nila, ang tawag niya borderline criminal. Kasi walang ginagawa eh. Yung mga ospital, talaga strained to the limit. Yung Minister ng Health ng Mexico, Bolivia, lahat sila sinabi, hindi na namin kaya, hindi man mailibing yung mga bangkay. So, basically, ang policy kapareho rin sa atin. Hintayin na lang dumating yung bakuna. Of course, there's yung exception, which I will discuss yung Cuba. Bukod doon, meron pa negative ng pinagkagawa yung gobyerno, specifically Colombia and Brazil. Pareho din ang ginagawa sa Pilipinas. Ginamit itong pandemic na dahilan para mag-initiate ng mas strictong mga measures na hindi man related talaga sa pandemic. It's more designed to control the population. Brazil at saka Colombia. Isa pa, parang binabaliwala yung buhay ng mga indihena. Ang mahirap, additional problem ng indihena is wala sila ng mga immunities ng urban population nitong mga bansang ito. Kaya bukod pa sa pandemic, yung iba pang sakit, ang death rate sa indigenous population ay astronomical. As though hindi pa mahirap yung hinaharap ng itong United States, pinagbawal pa ang remittances sa Venezuela at saka sa Cuba. Sa Venezuela in particular, this is anecdotal, no? Marami akong kaibigan doon. Tinanong ako kung kailan ka babalik dito? Pagbalik mo ba, pwede bang magdala ka ng insulin? Sabi ko, bakit insulin? Wala ba dyan? Sabi lang, meron. Kaya lang, hindi nila ma-afford. Yung sanctions, differential lang effect. Kung mariamang ka, kaya mo bumili miski ano. Lahat. Kung titignan niyo yung mapa ng South America, yung border ng Venezuela at saka Colombia, malaki, long and porous. Ang smuggling is a way of life doon sa mga border towns, no? Ganun din sa other side, Brazil on one side and Venezuela. ang may control ng smuggling sa Colombian border ay yung mga paramilitary ng Colombia. Ngayon, isa pang mahirap na nangyari sa Venezuela ay yung gold reserves nila na nakadeposito sa mga European countries frozen. Sumusunod sa US, there are 32 tons of gold na nakadeposito sa bangko sa England, hindi may release. Ang gusto ng gobyerno ng Venezuela, gamitin yung pera yung pambili ng gamot. Pero ngayon, nandun sa Supreme Court ng England, baka ang ginagamit na dahilan, legitimate din daw yung gobyerno nila Guaido, yung opposition sa Venezuela, kaya hindi nila nire-release. Yun yung ilang milyon yung magagamit nila. Hindi lang sa harapin itong problema ng pandemic, pati yun ang iba. Nabanggit ko na Cuba lang ang talagang medyo handa. Kasi sanay na yung mga Cubans. Taon-taon, tinatamaan sila ng hurricane, kapare sa atin, yung typhoon. Yung response nila sa natural at saka man-made disasters has always been collective. Yung mga neighborhood associations, yun ang first time of the Comité de Revolution. Alala mo yun, Weg? Mga Comité de Revolution, yun ang ginagamit na ang bilis ng contact testing. Sabihin mo, yan, kaso lang ang kaso. Marami pa dong gumaling. At ang namatay ay 137. Now, masakit ang mamatay. Bis ka ng 137 lang. No? Meron pang additional advantage sa Cuba na libre ang healthcare, universal healthcare. Kaya walang natatanggihan sa mga ospital. In addition to that, nag-umpisa sila maaga pa lang mag-develop ng bakuna laban dito. So ngayon testing na. Stage ng testing. Malapit na rin sigurong i-release. At nakakagulat pa, miski na mayroong tinamaan ng Cuba ng itong virus na ito, patuloy ang padala nila ng medical missions, hindi lang sa Latin America at Africa, hanggang Europe. Ang Italy, humingi ng medical mission sa Cuba. At meron sa New England na city, humihingi sa Cuba kung pwede kayong padala ba ng medical mission dito para problema namin sa COVID-19. So in sum, Cuba lang ang talagang handang humarap dito sa itong virus na ito. So, iiwanan ko na itong topic na itong pandemic unless meron kayong questions. Sige, itutuloy ko na doon sa overtly political developments sa Latin America. Bago ako tumuwid, gusto ko lang linawin. Pag ginamit ko yung terminal left, meron generic definition, walang particular party. Ginagamit ko ito to represent governments na committed to reduction of inequality, may independent foreign policy, committed to redistribution of wealth. Generic. Ngayon, sa Latin America, iba-iba ang yung left ng Cuba, iba doon sa Bolivia, kaliwa ng Brazil, Uruguay, Chile, na yung Bolivarian mas matindi. Yung Brazil, Uruguay, Chile, mas
Kamarinig.
yung ibang bayan sa Latin America, gaya ng Brazil, Uruguay, Chile, sabi nila kaliwa sila, mas kapareho ng social democratic states ng Scandinavia. Ibig sabihin, ang gusto ko pag ginamit ko yung salitang left, hindi nung ibig sabihin pare-pareho. Pero meron common traits yung binanggit ko. Okay. Hindi ko alam kung sino ang nag-coin ng term pink tide, pero parang appropriate na metaphor, suggesting movement of water, merong ebb, may flow. Siguro kailangan ng konting historical background para maintindihan yung masusunod na sasabihin ko. Gaya ng Pilipinas, maraming bansa sa Latin America ay nasa pailalim din ng iba't ibang diktadura noong 1970s and 80s. At doon talaga inumpisahan itong economic policy na inintroduce noong 1974, initially sa Chile, ng mga dating estudyante ni Milton Friedman sa University of Chicago, yung neo-liberal, yung withdrawal ng state from the economy. Ngayon, mga 1980s onward, nabuwag na yung mga diktadura, nawala yung mga dictators, pero yung economic system na tinayo nila, naiwan. So kapareho sa atin, mayroong mga nahalal na bagong leader, marami ay ang tumakbo sila under platform na i-reverse nila itong mga policies ng mga authoritarian governments. Pero hindi natuloy yun. I-maintain nila. Nung itong shift from authoritarian to democratic, nangyari ito nung panahon na, sulit kasi sa English when the old party systems were collapsing and their ability to maintain yung patronage was severely diminished. At saka ito rin yung panahon na yung mga traditional political parties ay nabubuwag na. Pareho rin sa atin. Hindi na pareho yung nawala, yung nationalista liberal party dominance, nawala na. Pareho rin sa Amerika Latina. Nangyari yan sa Venezuela. Halos lahat. Yung COPE at saka yung ADEO, meron na mga bagong mga formations. At saka nawala na ang mga guerrilla movements. Wala nang armed struggle ngayon sa buong Latin America. Yung nahuhuli, yung FARC, pumirma na ng peace agreement with gobyerno ng Colombia. At sa
Colombia. Pero dahil pinapatay, di ba meron ngayon isang malit na parte na nag-guerrilla ulit, no?
Yung Ejército de Liberación Nacional currently negotiating with the Colombian government. Nung pumirma ang FARC ng peace agreement na papasok na magko-concentrate na lang sila sa electoral process, samantalang nangyayari yon, mahigit na 254 na leaders nila ang pinatay na. Hindi ito bago, nangyari ito earlier, yung M19, ganyan din. Pumirma sila ng peace agreement, tapos inubos din sila ng gobyerno pagkatapos. Yung part, ginawa rin yan earlier. Pero malaki ang tiwala ng mga leaders ng part na kaya nilang yan itong transition from ng guerrilla. In the meantime, ang nakakawawa, ito yung describe ko lang yung panahon na pumasok ngayon itong think. Parang nag-fill in sila ng vacuum na iniwan ng mga political parties at guerrilla movements. More accurately, mga coalitions to na nagkasama representing nagtayo ng mga political platforms, gumagamit ng wide variety of strategies and tactics using both electoral or parliamentary struggles coupled with street action or participatory or protagonist politics as they are called in Latin America. Itong mga social movements na ito were successful in removing many unpopular, unresponsive leaders. For instance, sa Venezuela, in Argentina, in a span of 4 weeks, 4 na presidente ang pinatalbog nila. 3 sa Ecuador, 2 sa Bolivia, sa Venezuela. At itong mga movements na ito, nag-form ng mga political parties for electoral, to engage in electoral competition. No? Nangyari yan sa Venezuela, nung pinatakbo nila si Chavez, sa Ecuador, nung pinatakbo nila si Rafael Correa, yung mag-asawang Kirchner sa Argentina, si Tabaré Vázquez at saka si Jose Mujica sa Uruguay, si Michelle Bachelet sa Argentina, si Manuel Zelaya sa Honduras, si Evo Morales sa Bolivia, si Michelle Bachelet sa Chile. Baka mayroon pa palang iwan. Pero impressive. Marami silang napa-elect na mga leader. No? Collectively, itong mga bansa ito are binansagan na pink tide. No? And impressive din ang mga gains na nagawa nitong mga pink tide countries, you know, in terms of reducing poverty and inequality, yung promotion ng social development. Siguro Bolivia ang dating napaka-pobre sa buong Latin America. Siguro sa kanila yung pinaka-spectacular na gains in reduction of poverty at saka simultaneously while reducing poverty napataas nila yung nagkaroon ng economic growth, tumaas pa rin yung GDP nila. Samantalang patuloy ang redistribution nila ng revenue from the primary exports now.
Saka yung raising the educational level of the population. Malaking
yung social developments, particularly in health and education. Ang mahirap dito sa mga social investments na ito, yung returns are not immediately visible, no? Pero there are returns to social investments. These gains are attributed to the political agenda of these leaders of the pink tide. There is some changes in organization at saka leaders nagawa nila at a time when the price, ito importante, the price for their primary products, their primary exports, be it petroleum, soybean, lithium, or oranges, were favorable to the government. So, it gave mga gobyerno nila, Chavez, nila Morales, Lula da Silva, lahat sila ng pera para gamitin para sa social welfare and development. In the process, satisfying their political base. No? And they did this development, improvements in social sphere without making any structural changes in their economics and their position in the global economy. Sandali lang, may kumakatok sa pinto ko. Okay.
1992 pa pala siya nag-start, ano? Grabe.
Umaangal yung nakatira sa baba. Kung bakit daw maingay. Naririnig niyo ba ako ngayon?
Ayan.
Naririnig niyo ako? Nakuha niyo ba yung last point ko?
Sa ginamit yung export revenues para sa ano?
Sa social development.
Para sa social development.
Yes. Without changing without any changes sa walang structural changes. So the market economy is maintained. Ngayon, yung favorable price of their exports allowed, for instance, Hugo Chavez to fund yung mga missions on housing, food, education. Ganon din sa Bolivia, ginamit ni Evo Morales for the same purpose. Additionally, another safeguard, itong pink tide, nag-umpisa mag-form ng mga regional organizations gaya ng CELAC, NASUR, which are designed to strengthen their position via the European Union and US. But itong gains na ito were dependent on the continued favorable price for yung exports nila, which meant continued natural resource extraction or extractivism to fund yung social programs nila at saka yung agricultural exports. So all this while still maintaining yung market economy, yung liberal, capitalista, at saka neoliberal. Itong neoliberalism, as you all understand, grew in strength. While it grew in strength, it also sort of weakened. The state became stronger sa itong mga pink tide countries, but ironically, it also weakened the civil society groups. And that is the other downside. It was when the price of commodities started to fall, from second half of this decade, when some of these pink tide governments also started to fall. Ngayon, is it simply coincidence that yung all of the pink tide governments coincides with the fall in the price of their primary products? Hindi gusto kong pag-aralan pa ito. Hindi pa ako confident sa aking analysis. Pero there is that. Itong pagbagsak ng mga pink tide countries yung demand was affected in a variety of ways. No? Meron yung coup. Maybe not the military coup like in Chile in 1973, but it was a parliamentary coup that ousted Dilma Rousseff in Brazil in 2016 when 61 na lalaki, lahat lalaki, 61 lang, voted in Senate to oust her as president of Brazil. This was repeated parliamentary coup. This also happened in Paraguay with the ouster of Fernando Lugo, Manuel Zelaya, which is a kind of a mestizo coup, yan parliament and the military. Biglang dumating na lang sa bahay niya, nakapajama pa, sinakay sa aeroplano, pinapunta sa Costa Rica. Nakapajama lang. Ganyan din ang, well, yung kay Evo Morales, and I use the term coup, though others don't want to call it a coup. I use the word coup because it was an extra constitutional removal of an elected president. At saka yung term ni Evo Morales was due to expire last January 2020. Pero in 2019, when the commander of the armed forces tells you, maybe it's a good idea to go, and when yung bahay ng kapatid ng babae inatake, Bolivia also has a long history of military coups. Kasi sinabi ng commander, mabuti pa umalis ka na, dahil hindi, patay ka namin. So whether people agree with me or not on calling it a coup. I still will insist on calling it a coup. And alam ko na meron pa mga Filipino sa Bolivia ngayon na ayaw tawagin coup. But I think it was a coup. And the people there call it a coup. Then, in addition to that, yung coup, there are these electoral defeats, no? In Argentina, in Chile, in Brazil. It is quite possible for left governments to make mistakes and also misdeeds. For instance, yung Partido de Trabajo in Brazil was involved in corruption scandals. In Venezuela, there were a lot of opportunities to rode on the bandwagon of Chavez and engage in this. So yung corruption, tapos yung inability to continue the government system, it took its toll. Natalo sila sa election sa mga bansang ito. Yung case ng Ecuador is a little different. Yung presidente ngayon, Lenin Moreno, ran for elections with the endorsement nila Rafael Correa, progressive. Nung na-elect siya, bumaliktad, 180 degrees at saka binalik yung mga neoliberal practice. Favoring yung the export sector ng economy. So, itong second half nitong decade na ito, itong pink tide governments were seriously weakened and some of them thrown out of office. Sa Argentina, nakita nila na natalo na electorate si Mauricio Macri, who promptly ended the social programs nila Kirchner, yung Bolsa de Familia, mga ganon, no? Ganon din sa Chile, with natalo yung kaliwa na elect si Sebastian Piñera, who was at one time a minister in the Pinochet government. Sa Brazil, si Ignacio Lula da Silva retains his popularity, but he was prevented from running from office and was jailed. And this allowed for the election of Tito C. Bolsonaro, a relic from the military dictatorship of Brazil. He was in the military. And of course, all this were aided by the United States, which felt threatened by the display of independence of the countries and the loss of their investment, loss of revenue in their investments in the region. They never stopped trying to destabilize these governments. From the very start, there was the 2000 coup in Venezuela, which ousted Chavez for a few days, but who was returned to office by the popular movement. There was meron din police coup in Ecuador in 2009, tried to oust Rafael Correa, pero hindi sumama army. It also funded yung attempts towards secession by yung racist right wing in Bolivia. Yung oil-rich Media Luna provinces, sinubukan nilang magsecede from Bolivia. Interestingly enough, yung naging ambassador sa atin, ang mastermind, yung si Goldberg, hindi na siya ngayon ang ambassador sa atin, but before naging ambassador siya sa Pilipinas, he was the ambassador to Bolivia.
Siya ang pinalayas ni Evo Morales bago kaya siya nakapunta. Siyang
So patuloy ang United States nag-apply ng mga economic sanctions sa Venezuela. Nabanggit mo na wala nang remittances pumunta sa Cuba at saka Venezuela. At saka yung freezing ng mga assets nila, gold reserves in Europe. I'm sure there are other creative techniques to destabilize the government. So by the middle of itong second decade, 21st century, it appeared na the pink tide was ebbing and the right was on the ascendancy. But I think it is too early for them to celebrate. Because if we go by recent electoral victories in the region, it appears that the pink tide is now again on a flow mode. Hindi na ebb, back to flow, but never the same. Consider this. Si Alberto Fernandez nanalo, regained the presidency in Argentina in 2019. Talo si Alberto Fernandez. Just recently, si Luis Arce na elect as president of Bolivia. Not only was he elected, they also, yung Mas Movimiento al Socialismo gained the majorities in the parliament. Si Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, well, nanalo sa Mexico in 2018. He did not run under the traditional political parties, but the coalition na tinawag nilang Morena, Movimiento para la Regeneración. Recently, nanalo sa Brazil, sa Sao Paulo, the major industrial city, nanalo yung mayor ng position. Ganon din ang nangyari sa Montevideo, sa Uruguay. Recently, yung right-wing president ng Peru was ousted by a popular movement and initiated by the indigenous population opposed to mining. Itong issue of extractivism. Yung social movements sa Chile, nanalo sa oferta noong Oktubre, nanalo ng referendum, which would allow them to rewrite the Constitution of Chile. Yung Constitution nila ngayon ay yung nung panahon pa ni Pinochet.
Fascist.
At itong recent election sa Venezuela, nanalo ang Polo Patriotico, the Patriotic Pole. Hindi lang nanalo, nakakuha nila ang majority sa National Assembly. Si Maduro pa rin ang presidente nila. The left in the region just learned its lessons and has embraced sa akin a new task which resists the destructive agenda of right neoliberalism while simultaneously building the power and the capacity of to more effectively advance the goals of the left in its return to power. To this end, gusto ko lang banggitin tatlong sector sa economy sa bansang ito that were very important in effecting these changes. I will cite three. Millennials. These students, not students, millennials. Now, many of them were born early enough to enjoy the benefits that happened immediately after the end of the dictatorships. But again, they also know what it is to be without those benefits when the right returned to power. The other sector is the mga indígena. This is particularly true with the Mapuche in southern Chile, the Aymara and Quechua in Peru, in Bolivia, Ecuador, the many different indigenous groups of Mexico. Even in Mexico City, they now have ongoing, there's one particular indigenous group that took possession of the offices of the indigenous, or the National Indigenous Organization. Lastly, the women's movement. Now, gender violence has always been understated in this region, known for machismo. Uh, just to add on to this, the gains affected by these three different sectors. Yung in Colombia, before the pandemic, it was the millennials who started the counterattack against the neoliberal policies, and they even started already. They already had started making links with the other groups like Indiana and also the Afro-Colombian communities located in the coast. Uh, I'll go in more detail with Chile. So it's all over the region now. The, the growth of the women's movement. Uh, okay. I'll go into more detail to nangyari sa Chile because it shows the ito tatlong grupo how they managed to win in the referendum. Okay, as early as 2006. Nasa high school pa itong mga it was the high school students in Chile. The asking for reforms in the educational system through gerrymandering. Some districts were favored, and so they had more money to spend on education. There's also indirect subsidy of private schools. So there was very little money for public education. Ito yung tinutulak ng mga high school students. By 2014, hindi na high school po. And they were already making links with the labor movement, which has been seriously weakened by contractualization. By 2018, the students were able to paralyze the country, and they already shifted the attention to the larger issue, hindi lang educational reform. And this is evident in their slogan, the slogan they use. The slogan went like this: No es el 30, no es el 30 pesos, sino el 30 años. It is not the 30 pesos. Kasi ang ginawa itong gobyerno ni Piñera, also done in Colombia, was they needed money, new taxes, tinaas nila yung pasahe sa public transport. So yung slogan ng mga estudyante, no es el 30 pesos, sino el 30 años, referred to it did refer specifically to the increase in transport fare, it really referred to the Pinochet constitution that had been in effect for the last 30 years. So it's not the 30 peso increase in the transportation, but the 30-year Pinochet constitution. So iba na, mas broader na yung demand. And with that broadening, they were able to pull in the other sectors. So finally, they were able to force the Piñera government into a referendum, and they won, and they will now rewrite their constitution. Now, while this is all happening, the gender violence in Chile would no longer be. Now, this is true not just for Chile, but all over. It has always been understated. But I don't know if you're familiar with this dance chant, Tu eres el violador, you are the rapist. I don't know if you've heard this, but you should check it out sa YouTube. It's a chant na may kasamang sayaw. It has gone viral. That started in Chile. It is about gender violence. So ito tatlong grupo. And just to illustrate the precariousness and how strong they have become. Ang approval rating ng presidente ng Chile ngayon, Sebastian Piñera, is only 7%. Miski sino patakbo sa susunod na eleksyon, talo ito. Now, what did I come out? What did I sort of conclude from these developments? Well, ano mapupulot natin? Ano magagamit? Well, one is the importance of building coalitions. Very important. And how the groups within the coalition relate to each other. I think all of you are now familiar with the concept of horizontalismo. The groups in these social movements, magkapantay-pantay, wala nang vanguard party. Walang cult. It's interesting because even the communist parties in Uruguay and the other places are part of these social movements. But their interpretation of what is to be done is a little different by working together, I observed this, yung differences between the groups become diminished and sometimes nawawala because of the struggle na nakapaliwanag ng mga grupo kung anong kakaibahan nila at nare-resolve yung mga differences. The other thing that is the other development in the pink tide movements in this second decade of this century is hindi na tinatago yung goal talaga. Sinasabi na talaga, with the exception of sa Bolivia, talagang patungo kami sa sosyalismo. Wala na nitong. Well, yes, we engage in these social welfare programs, but at the end, we are still working towards a more complete restructuring of the economy. At the end of these neoliberal policies, we are really for socialism. Actually, the question of socialism, what form it will take, was already started long ago in sila Chavez when they were debating what form it will be, the 21st century socialism. This is a continuing debate. The third thing I would like to mention is there is a lot of questioning on the wisdom and the efficacy of this policy of extractivism. Hindi for a variety of reasons, climate change, environmental reasons, ayaw na nilang gamitin ito. Dahil to begin with, na talaga naman nade-deplete ito mga natural resources at one point in the future. But in the meantime, the many negative effects on the environment are also exposed. And maraming mining companies operating in Latin America are not really from Latin America. In fact, some of them are the same companies operating in the Philippines, like Oceana Gold. No? So, in this ng extractivism, it is the indigenous population. Now, it has resulted in some changes in the constitution. In some countries, the constitutions of Bolivia and Ecuador contain a clause called the Bien Vivir or Vivir Bien. It means respect. It's essentially draws from indigenous traditions, the respect for the environment, the relationship between human beings and the environment. Let me end there and just address. I was really just guessing what sort of things that might interest you about the developments in Latin America. So let me stop there and address the questions that you may have. Mas mabuti na yun. Okay? So, if meron kayong mga tanong,
Kung meron
Galil?
akong question.
Sorry. Galil, would you like to moderate this part? Hello, Galil.
Hello?
Yeah, would you like to moderate this part?
Medyo mahirap lang sa akin kasi nasa coffee shop ako. So,
Mahirap. Sige, sige.
yung audio, o hindi.
Oo. Okay naman yung audio mo. Pero sige.
But I don't think we...
Wag na mag-moderate. Ano na lang.
Oo,
Sige,
kasi
jump na lang tayo lahat.
conversations na lang.
no,
Mas
conversation.
free-flowing and mas open
Oo.
discussion.
Okay. Sige, sige. Okay, kanina merong sorry na-cut off ko. Kanina meron nang gusto magtanong eh. Or mag-comment pala. Just jump in, please.
Opo, ako po yan. Kaya Prof. Chibu, nawawala-wala ako kanina kaya hindi ko nasundan yung iba. Pero familiar naman din yung mga huling naabutan ko. Kaya lang parang ang mas hindi nabibigyan ng focus yung sa Ecuador po na yung nangyari sa ginawa ni Lenin Moreno. Anong pinaka-interesante sa inyo? Sa inyong pinaka-interesanteng pangyayari sa Ecuador? Yung from may pink tide nga, di ba? Pero biglang inendorso ng isang Rafael Correa, pero biglang nag 180 degrees. Iba naman yung kaso ni Jair kasi si Jair
naisahan sila Korea. Ginamit sila Korea.
Paano yun? Ano yung coalition na nangyari doon?
So,
naalala ko sila Haddad Fernando Haddad. Hindi, sa pala yun? Brazil pala yun.
Popular yung gobyerno ni Rafael Correa dahil ginamit niya yung revenues from oil, from agricultural exports. Ginamit niya to finance yung mga social programs. Parang ginawa nila Chavez, nila Lula.
Okay.
So, merong limit sa term. No? Hindi na pwedeng tumakbo uli si Rafael Correa. Maraming bansa sa Latin America, ganyan, hindi ka pwedeng tumakbo 2 beses kasunod. No? Ito si Lenin Moreno was the finance minister ng panahon ni Correa. So siya nag-implement ng mga social programs na nakinabang ang tao. So popular yung gobyerno nito. Pero kaya nung hindi na makatakbo uli si Correa, pinatakbo si Lenin Moreno. Yung pala bantay sa lakay. Nung elect siya, binitawan sila Korea. In fact, pinapa-aresto ngayon si Korea ni Lenin Moreno. At nakapag-alliance siya sa mining at saka yung agriculture exporters. In particular, yung the banana exporters na may control ng southern Ecuador. Pero ang opposition ng mga indihena sa Ecuador, tuloy-tuloy. Yung environmental damage na nangyari dahil sa mga oil companies, grabe. Merong mga lakes doon na wala nang marine life. Pero nakaupo sa poder si Lenin Moreno dahil sa natulungan nila Korea noon. Ngayon, kinakalaban sila. It's a unique case yung nangyari sa Ecuador.
Parang sa kanya nagsimula yung turning of the tide. Tama ba?
Hindi. Now,
Sa Ecuador.
I would say,
Yung nagbago from progressive.
nung mga mas maaga pa nung umpisang bumagsak yung presyo ng petrolyo nung inumpisa ng Saudi Arabia yung gera, yung price war sa petrolyo. Doon naramdaman dahil marami sa Latin American countries na miyembro ng OPEC. Venezuela, Brazil, Ecuador. Mahirap mag-assign ng specific date, no? Pero around the mga 2010 onwards, humina na ang mga pink tide governments. Diyan din yung kasabay ng pagbagsak ng presyo ng mga primary exports nila. Ang makikita natin doon na for as long as you're locked into the market economy, even though you are able to fund mga social programs and housing, health, and health, but for as long as you're locked into the market economy, there are limits. There are booms. Yes, there are boom and bust cycles, but it's never a return to the original position. It's either better or worse, and now it's worse. Kawawang-kawawin, for instance, Venezuela, which is dependent on this petroleum. Kalahati ang gross national product nila yun. Kalahati lang compared to yung panahon ni Chavez. Then you couple that with yung sanctions, so maintindihan nyo kung gaano kahirap ang buhay ngayon sa Venezuela. Pero nakita rin natin na hindi tinatanggap ng tao dahil nanalo ang polo patriotiko ito ng huling eleksyon. Hindi tinatanggap ng So that is why, sa huli, I think, hindi na itinatago, we are for socialism. We have to make structural changes in the economy. Hindi pwedeng naranasan na natin.
Chibu, pa-clarify lang kasi yung batay dun sa kwento mo, itong nung ma-start ma-elect itong mga pink tide na states, na government. So ibig sabihin hindi sila lantad-lantaran na may goal sila towards socialism nung time na yon.
No.
So wala pa. And therefore
there are exceptions.
Oo. So ilan lang na exceptions.
Exception is Bolivia.
Okay.
And
Morales. Yeah, so ang mas nila ay like something parang may pagka-populism ng governance. And meron kang binanggit kanina na gusto ko lang ipa-clarify na at the same time na nandun ito, meron din namang ironically na nag-weaken ang civil society. Can you explain that some more? Kasi parang naiisip ko nung panahon ng people power nga dito sa Pilipinas, umusbong ang maraming civil society, and yet over the years kita naman natin kung is it really getting stronger kahit sa Pilipinas or not? Ang influence nila. So sa Latin America, so what happened? Bakit nag-weaken?
Neoliberalism requires withdrawal of the state from the economy, or at least diminished.
Weakening
the economy. We are agreed on that?
Role.
The pink tide governments who that are against this economic policy, but when they came to power, when Chavez also, they also strengthened the state. They strengthened the state. They participated in. They were able to, kasi yung requirement of control over the population. the resources that were generated. How is it going to be distributed? Because the state, it was the strong state, and as in Venezuela and in the other countries, walang capacity yung mga gobyerno. Mahihina yung mga institutions nila, no? So it was the state that had to be strengthened. But the strengthening of the state required more control over the population. Humina ito ang mga civil society groups. They deferred, many times they deferred to the government. In Venezuela in particular, si Chavez relied heavily on the military. Later on na lang, started with the organization of communal councils, funding these communal councils, allowing them to decide how the budget was going to be. They were given a budget and the right to decide how that money was to be spent. But huli na. In Bolivia, it's the same. The government institutions were very weak. So, kasi yung racism has long excluded the indigenous population. So it was the state that had to act in their behalf. I hope that, and I already mentioned that that a lot of people jumped into the bandwagon and abused their position in the state. So you have corruption in Venezuela. There was. It took a long time. The state petroleum company was milking cow. The state had to intervene and take over. But at the same time, they also weakened the labor union in the oil industry. I don't know if that sufficiently explains what seems to be a contradiction. While you want more state involvement in the economy, you also weaken the civil society groups. Raquel, does that answer?
Palaisipan lang talaga, Chibu, kasi, laging at the back of your minds, sa kontekstong ganyan, sa konteksto ng Pilipinas, paano kaya? I mean, mayroon kang isusulong na gusto mong klase ng governance, and yet kung hindi siya kung pinag-uusapan na rin nung time na yon anong klaseng sosyalismo, I mean, malamang kahit hindi man outwardly but amongst themselves pinag-uusapan yan. And yet parang hindi malinaw kung paano yung prosesong dadaanan nila to strengthen to go through with the changes that they wanted, na at the same time na participative pa rin siya. Kaya yun yung elemento na maaaring nawala kung sinasabi mo civil society naman ang medyo na itabi-tabi na isang tabi diyan, di ba?
There is also another sidelight to that, no? Yung tinatawag ng socialism from above. Nagdidictate. But the debates on what form socialism will take in this century, actually nag-umpisa na yung debate sa Latin America. Kaya lang na-overtake ng mas grabing problema. The most organized discussion, this was in Venezuela, sila Monica Lewinsky, at si Chavez mismo ang nagtulak na pag-aralan na natin ito. Hindi na pwede ito. nag-umpisa ako magpunta sa Venezuela in 2002. Nakita ko doon na alam ni Chavez na kaya lang yung style of leadership niya iba. For instance, yung trying to reinvigorate agriculture, no? Para hindi na tayo dependent masyado sa oil. Si Chavez, when he came to office, 80% of food requirements of Venezuela were imported. Do you have 10 minutes of time for me to explain this extractivism in Venezuela?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Nung na-discover ang oil to be in commercial quantities, the second decade of the past century, it caused a massive, rapid, and dramatic shift in the economy that transferred resources from the rural areas to the urban. Siyempre, ikaw ba, magsasaka, kampesino, gusto mo magtrabaho sa farm, mas malakas ang kita sa pabrika ng petrolyo, no? And the allied industries. Essentially, it's a neo-Ricardian. Why should we address agriculture when we make so much money in the petroleum? We will just import food. So ganun nga nangyari. When oil was discovered, Venezuela was a agricultural economy exporting coffee and cacao. Yung famous Colombian coffee did not start in Colombia. It started in the Orinoco region in Venezuela at mabot na lang sa Colombia later on. Now, we all are aware of the boom and bust cycles in capitalism. When the price of oil drops, what happens to the economy? You can almost make a correlation with the price of oil and civil disorder in Venezuela. Okay, what happened? Oil became afflicted what is known as the enfermedad holandesa, the Dutch disease. It's when a particular sector of the economy becomes overly powerful, dominant, that it dictates the direction and conduct of the rest of the economy. In Venezuela, it is oil.
It's usually extractive.
It is not usually, it is extractive actually. Miskin yung processing was not completely Venezuelan. What Chavez did really was it just reduced and also Evo Morales. What was it reduced the share of these foreign companies in these extractive industries. Ngayon, yung debate about extractivism is not only is it that the over-dominance of one particular sector, so that if something wrong happens to that sector, the whole country is affected. No? But it's not only that. It's also transferred into concerns about the environment and climate change. Mining in particular, the way it's been conducted in Latin America, open pit mining, and foreign companies. So there is a lot of debate now on the wisdom of continuing this policy. Well, yes, we understand that these countries need revenue to fund their social programs. To become overly dependent on one particular commodity like oil. What happens when Saudi Arabia decides to start a price war? Yan nangyari sa Venezuela. Tingnan mo yan. And then you couple that with the sanctions that the United States has imposed on the country. Talagang kawawa.
So, siguro habang nandito tayo sa topic ng extractivism, kasi related din dito yung question na gusto kong i-raise. Reflecting back on our BALINTATAW discussion din on Bolivia, kung matatandaan nyo last year, during kasagsagan ng coup sa Bolivia and the resignation of Evo Morales. Yung isang question kasi na in-look doon is how can progressive governments pursue or implement their socio-economic reforms without resorting to extractivism.
Yan nga ang dilemma. Yan ang dilemma talaga.
Yun po yung heard a compelling argument na ano bang konkretong alternative kung hindi mining, kung hindi oil. So how can you generate revenue to support yung socio-economic reforms mo nga? At the same time, yung resulta din ng extractivist regime na dinispossess mo yung mga katutubo and the farmers of lands, and you essentially weaken the countryside with this extractivist regime. So paano din yun i-reconcile?
Si Chavez understood that early on. Kaya so he initially started no, pero hindi natuloy na, hindi na isulong ng todo the diversification of the economy. He started with yung land reform. Kasi nga Venezuela was importing most of its food requirements, no? And if you import, then you are held hostage by the exporting country, whoever exports the food product that you need, no? So he started yung land reform to invigorate the rural sector, no? He was able to meet some modicum of success. When he died, Venezuela was when he came into office, Venezuela was importing 80% of its food requirements. When he died, it was reduced to 65%. And that's quite impressive given period of time they were able to do this. So that is one measure. You have to diversify the economy and not be totally reliant on one commodity. Evo Morales, not so much. Well, he started with the land reform because, but the rationale was not trying to get away from this extractivism as much as empowering the indigenous community, which was losing its land base. With respect to the indigenous community, identity politics is still very, how would I describe it? Identity is still important, is very important to them, and its connection with the land base. They understand that if you use your land, you are going to eventually lose your identity as indigenous. It was very made clear to me by yung mga Zapatistas. Because if you lose your land, you will go where you'll have to look for employment elsewhere. Yan ang nangyayari sa Mexico City, sa Mexico. So diversification of the economy is one. Sa Bolivia, ironically, they cut down the production of coca. It is Colombia now that is the highest producer of coca in cocaine, followed by Peru. Mas ang gusto ni Morales controlled. And I think Morales also understood that, because what happened in Bolivia is when they started privatizing it was dependent on mining. It actually Bolivia funded the Spanish Empire. Well, when the mines closed, the miners went down to the Yungas, started planting coca. And the miners in Colombia are the most politicized group. So they were able to
organized.
Oh yeah, very well organized. Naalala ko, masama ako nung kampanya ni Morales. Itong mga minero, nagpapasabog ng dinamita. Sabi ng mga tao, andito na yung mga minero.
Malaking bagay nga sa pagtagumpay nila ngayon sa election yung pagiging organized yung base na dating nasa coca farms.
The other thing, there's another feature of Bolivia that the bears mentioning. No? Bolivia is the other country in Latin America that has an indigenous majority. No? And this majority has always been marginalized since the beginning of since colonization. Kaya rin hindi ma-develop ng Bolivia. Napakayaman ng Bolivia. Napakayaman in natural resources. Kaya hindi nila ma-develop because they do not have the educational infrastructure with which to develop these industries. Bakit? Because of racism. They would not allow hindi nila pinabayaan yung mga indihena mag-aral. Ganyan ka na lang sa plant coca and mining. Napakayaman so what you see in Bolivia is okay. Napakayaman nila. They have natural gas. Anong ginagawa ng mga tao? They get the gas and they sell it to unprocessed. You can see it in the neighboring highway in Chile and in Argentina. Pinibenta yung natural gas now in gallon-sized plastic containers. Kasi when it makes more sense to sell them the processed product, but they don't know how to do it. Oh, incidentally, one of the reasons for the coup in Bolivia can be traced to lithium, an ingredient needed now more in computers and all kinds of things. Bolivia has one of the largest reserves of lithium.
Sa ilalim ng kanilang malawak na asinan.
Yes. Punta ka doon sa na parang desert. Kung nasaan ang lithium. But on the whole, I'm quite optimistic with these recent developments. Natututo rin naman yung mga social movements sa Latin America. Saka yung nakikita mo sa organization, hindi na yung political organization na nilalapitan. Pati yung mga single issue groups like environmental groups, LGBT, sinasama, nakapasok na rin sa mga social movements. Which is to me a very healthy development. At saka mabuti naman din na yung mga communist party, left parties are shedding yung sectarian attitudes. Though it has caused some damage. No? In Argentina, ito mga Trotsky, may sinabutahe yung gobyerno ng Kirchner, no? By forming rival piketero groups, yung ganun. But
di ba, Chibu? Di ba sa Venezuela ang lakas pa din naman ng mga problema ng like ang Communist Party ng Venezuela, marami silang kiskisan din dun sa mga ibang Chavista, no? Yung Green Left, pareho ito, Green Left ngayon at saka yung Communist Party, hindi sila sumama dun sa Gran Polo Patriotico. Tapos pag binasa mo yung mga issue, meron nga silang nakikitang kakulangan ng demokrasya. Pakikitungo sa mga magsasaka, may mga ganun silang mga issue. Pero sometimes, sa tingin ko ang problema, nagiging parang adversarial kaagad. Yung pwede nga talagang kuhanin na pagkakataon din ng tunay na kaaway, halimbawa, kalaban talagang mga ahente ng US, inaano yan sinisisi nila na opportunity yan para mang-intriga at lalong pagwasak-wasakin yung hanay. So nakikita ko yan sa Venezuela na susubaybayan ko. Malaki ang problema diyan sa Ecuador, di ba? Yung talagang malaking section ng mga katutubo at saka malaking section ng teachers ang kumalaban talaga kay to the point na muntik na silang mag-alsa. Ganun din naman sa Bolivia. May mga diferensya, pero kung basically alam nila na halimbawa, itong grupo na dinadala ni Evo Morales ay talagang nagdadala ng sosyalismo. Sa tingin ko, may mga dapat talagang yung wag masyado adversarial, critical pero wag masyado adversarial. May mga ganun silang dinaanan.
Oo, totoo yan sinasabi mo. Pero nung itong formation of coalitions, ang importante may contact. Makasama sa trabaho. Ang nakikita ko sa social movement sa Latin America, siguro on some issues, hindi tayo makasama. But we are still in contact. So if another issue arises where we have common goals, pwede tayo magsama uli. And it is in the course of the struggle that these differences somehow get worked out. Dahil nagkakaintindihan agad ito pala ng pag-iisip nyo. Now, while it is true na merong not the entire Communist Party of Venezuela, but some of them are already incorporated sa PSUV, sumama na sila sa Partido Socialista Unidad de Venezuela. There are communist parties na nasa sa loob ng ibang social movements. In Uruguay, sa Frente Amplio, the Communist Party is there. Yes, there are differences, but those differences can be worked out. Ngayon, yung sa Ecuador, yes, the demands of the indigenous people, and hindi sila majorities sa Ecuador, but they're sizable yung population ng indigenous sa Ecuador. But hindi yung in the process of exploiting yung natural resources to fund the social programs, napabayaan yung environmental damage to the indigenous communities. Hindi masyadong natulungan. For instance, may kaso yung indigenous against mga oil companies sa states. Hindi masyadong natulungan ng gobyerno nito dahil was more interested in generating revenue from the oil at that time. So you have these conflicts. But those conflicts can be resolved if somehow may contact pa rin. So yung contact is the first step. Yes. Nag-uusap tayo. Siguro hindi tayo magkasama ngayon sa lakad na ito, pero who knows tomorrow.
Pero meron bang Chibu, yung mga iba-iba kasi ngayon, sige, you're saying na it highlights itong history niya and how it's turning out, highlights the importance of these coalitions and horizontalism or horizontal solidarity or something. Pero meron ba sa history ng mga countries na yan na itong mga iba-ibang mga grupo na ito na left progressives umabot sa patayan? Kasi history kung bagahe,
Okay.
magiging bagahe, kung wala yung bagahe na yon, then it's understandable na keeping in touch and
the only cases that I'm aware of, though there are cases that I may not be aware of, was in Peru with Sendero Luminoso.
Shining Path.
Yung mga kalaban na kaliwa, pinapatay rin nila. But of course, this Sendero Luminoso is now so it's still there. It's a shell of its former self. It's now engaged also in
yung
it's also
Shining
engaged
Path?
now in the coca
Oo.
trade.
Ito yung mga medyo Maoist, yung yung linya.
Maoist siya.
Hindi naman. Maoist.
Maoist siya.
Sige.
It's still there in Peru, pero napakahina, no? Tsaka pumasok na sa coca trade. Well, FARC was involved in the coca trade, but different from both. Colombia is unique, both the government, the paramilitary, and the guerrillas are all involved in the coca trade, but in different ways. Yung FARC extracts tribute using the same methods as the NPA, revolutionary tax.
Peru lang. So, kung Peru lang yun, at sa ibang countries, wala yun, ganon, understandable na it's easier for them to really, form these coalitions na walang walang historical baggage ng
Wala.
Mga ganon.
Yung lang yung rivalries.
Rivalry.
Existed.
Pero meron pa rin
hindi nagpatayan.
Oo, pero merong umiral pa rin na time na vanguardism ang umiiral sa mga sa mga dominant left groups.
Yes. Lahat, including democratic centralism and all that.
Pero how is it now? Itong with this latest na binanggit mo na developments, yung mas current developments, how is the politics now shaping up? Lalo na binanggit mo rin na in large part yung turning back na naman ay dahil din sa support ng mga millennials.
Okay. When I said the political parties have been substantially weakened, that includes communist parties.
Okay.
And of course, there is the memory of failed attempts towards the seizure of power.
Okay.
The first anti-American demonstration in Latin America was in Venezuela during the time of Richard Nixon, when Richard Nixon was still vice president, in the 1950s. There are rivalries between left groups. Sa atin meron, bakit mawawala? Meron din doon. Pero it never reached the point na kapareho sa atin na papatayin mo yung karibal mo. But now there is an agreement about the damage of this neoliberal policy on the population. There is agreement there. There are still disagreements on what has to be done, but the good thing is they're talking to each other. Now, or they will be forced to talk to each other. Like sometimes you don't have a common agenda. That's fine. The goals of the women's movement, for instance, may not exactly be the same as the other. They're not the same as the students, for instance. They may not even be the same for all women. For instance, in Argentina today, the debate is on legalizing abortion. And there are women's groups that favor and oppose. But hindi yung maaabot kapareho sa atin na papadala mo yung mga Alex Bongkayaw Brigade para patayin yung kalaban. It did happen in Peru with the Sendero Luminoso.
At naman sila may dating armed struggle, di ba?
Oo, pero wala na ngayon. Wala na.
Pero dati pare-pareha sila mayroong guerrilla movements. Ang isang maganda lang siguro kasi halimbawa ang naging successful doon sa armed na laban ang Cuba. Sila naman the original Communist Party was already weakened. Was very weak. nung nagtayo si na Castro. So actually yung Communist Party ay hindi siyang nag-lead, no? So naging iba ngayon ang itsura, hindi makapagyabang kumbaga kasi hindi sila ang nag-lead ng laban.
Which is true in most of Latin America, the pink-tide governments that emerged in Latin America. But there was always some component of some left group dito sa social movements. All of them had. But hindi na magkaroon ng parang, we can agree to disagree on certain things.
Tapos
pero
yung
hindi na patayan. Hindi na.
Hindi mo sinagot yung question ko, Chibu, on yung sa millennials.
Okay. Pakiulit nga lang ulit.
Yeah, kasi yung mas currently sa current developments na hindi ko na get kanina kung yung you were referring to particular sectors nga na naging key sa sa affecting changes, but then hindi ko nakuha kung at what point ng history ng Latin America, or is it also applying dito sa pinaka-current na na developments, like we're looking at some turning back ulit dun sa left progressive na ng ilang bansa.
To begin with, yung mga bata it doesn't matter what part of the world, they're more daring than us, mga thunders kapero natin. Can we agree on
that's
that?
normal.
Do you accept that?
Normal yan sa takbo ng naturalesa.
Okay.
Matatapang ang mga bata.
Tapos, you consider this, when I mentioned the Chapel of Chile, started with high school students who somehow had the taste of what the benefits that the changes in their society brought. No? Like in Chile, nawala yung dictatorship ni Pinochet, nakinabang din, nakatikim ng progreso yung mga bata. Pero natikman din nila nung nawala yun. So meron naaalala pa rin nila yung mga pangako na binigay ng kaliwaan nung referendum ng 1988. Alam mo nangyari noon, it was concertation. Yung left, the Socialist Party, Communist Party, agreed with the center. Sige, bibigay namin sa inyo itong, hindi namin gagalawin yung economy. Pero we also get a crack at political leadership. And they did. Elect si Michelle Bachelet. Pero, hindi binago yung economic system. Kaya, pag sa uli ng deteriorate, nararamdaman ng mga bata yan. Bakit gano'n? Natin, ganun lang ang binabayad namin sa pasahe. Ngayon, tinaas na naman nila yung pasahe. Yan din ang nangyari sa Colombia. Yung neoliberalism is not eviscerated. So, alam nila yung before and after yung mga millennials. Kaya I suspect there's the more dynamic. At saka yung directly affected sila, no? Pareho fair increase. Sino tatamaan nun? Hindi naman yung mga mayayaman dahil may mga coaches sila papunta sa UP. Hindi naman sila sumisakay ng ikot. Yung mga estudyante, manggagawa, ang nasaktan, talagang tinaas yung presyo ng pasahe. So, so it's not surprising to me na itong millennials are at the forefront of this struggle.
But you're talking
But
only about Chile, di ba? Sige,
But no,
Galil.
hindi,
that's true. Also in Colombia, it was the fare increase that which
Colombia. Okay.
made the students state. It was again the students sa Colombia started demonstrations 2 years ago. At saka, in the case of Chile, yung mga bata were able to make the transition from the issue of fare increase to the economic system. It's not the 30 peso increase, but the constitution that allows the continuation of this neoliberal economy that we should address. They were successful in doing that transition from one issue to the larger issue of neoliberalism.
Galil,
gusto ko
may
lang,
gusto ka
gusto ko lang sabihin na na while I agree and recognize din naman younger people are at the forefront of the struggle. Pero hindi ko rin i-discount yung valuable contribution din and role ng mga ex-youth.
Alam mo yung pag kung titignan mo, ang ginagawa ng mga social movements sa Latin America, sa unang ginagawa nila is reform ng constitution. Si Chavez did it. Si Chavez did not change the economic minister on assuming office. He waited until the National Assembly came out with this new constitution.
Bolivia, ganun din.
Ganun din. Argentina.
So what you're saying is that yung mga millennials pag nag-put forward sila, mas yun talaga ang pinupuntirya, tinitira agad yung sa constitution.
No, not just the millennials. I think the constitution addresses the economy, especially in the distribution of resources. No, but the millennials also recognize that on their own hindi nila kaya. Kaya I used millennials instead of student movement, no? Because marami talaga estudyante, no? But they realized that on their own they will not be able to affect these changes. So they started making links with the Mapuche people, the trade unionists in Chile, and the women's movement. Kaya yung coalition, it doesn't have to be all political organizations. It's a single issue, LGBT.
Tulungan pa rin talaga, Chibu, kasi maski sa likod ni Evo Morales, there was Linnea Garcia, ba? Yung kanyang vice...
Alvaro Linnea Garcia.
Alvaro Linnea Garcia, the vice president. Mas siya yung, sabihin natin, old guard, no? Yung, siya yung from the Marxist mold pa, yung kanyang... na malaki din ang naging papel sa pagdidiri ng movement toward socialism, yung mass. Tapos ngayon itong kasalukuyang presidente,
Lucas Arce.
Arce ay sabi nga niya 12 anyos pa siya nagbabasa na siya ng Marx. So may malaking papel pa rin sa pag-aayos ng kanilang direksyon. Yung mga matatandang may alam, sabihin mo, dun sa fundamentals.
No, I agree with you totally, no? Pero hindi lang sila ngayon.
Hindi lang sila.
Alvaro Linnea Garcia, I got to know him during kampanya ni Morales. He's a very interesting person. Hindi siya indihena. Puti. But he joined yung
yes, puti siya na professor. Ay, nagtuturo.
Anyway, andun pa rin yung matatandang Marxista Pero hindi naman dogmatic yung interpretation nila.
Yun ang importante.
Hindi dogmatiko.
Hindi dogmatiko. Tsaka baka malalawak mag-isip. Hindi yung
At saka,
pwede.
the other is take to inspiration from yung mga nangyari sa sarili nilang bansa. For instance, sa Bolivia, it traced the movement all the way up to the organization ng resistance ng colonial period. At yung mga pangalan ng guerrilla groups that emerged, mga Tatarista, andun pa rin. Ang maganda, at least yung mga sila Linera Garcia, is yun nga, they welcome these new ideas. At saka yung makikita mo sa mga binabasa nila. No? For instance, I never heard of Jose Carlos Maria Peggy, who happens to be yung pala isa sa theorist on involvement ng Indígena sa Latina, sa Latina America. Yung mga theorists nila ngayon, mga homegrown na. Miski na sa Venezuela, si Lewinsky galing sa Cuba, involved ng kay Allende.
Yan.
Yung sa Bolivia, yung mga minero, the most politicized group, were able to cross-fertilize yung other groups like copaleros. Ang napansin ko sa mga Marxista doon, hindi yung
Hindi yung mayroong blinders.
Mas open-minded. I mean, for instance, yung attitude, one thing, yung attitude towards drugs, medyo iba. I mean, why defend coca? Coca is a tradition. Sa Bolivia, may cultural ano yan, hindi mo pwedeng ano yan. Iba yung rason bakit sila gumagamit ng coca. Yung mga nasa New York na kung ano-ano nilalagay sa ilong nila. Bago mamatay si Chavez na binigyan niya ng tulak sila yung mga theorists to start studying anong shape kaya itong 21st century socialism. So there was already committed to a socialist form of government. But we just don't know what the contours will be like. Let's start discussing that. And nakapaglabas sila ng mga ilang tapos yun nga, yung mga progresibo sa Latin America are reading their own histories and finding out what can be extracted, something useful that can be extracted from our own histories. And you see the effect in Bolivia, o ngayon sa Peru, Ecuador, especially among mga katutubo. They are looking at their own history rather than the experience of the Europeans.
Chibu, dyan sa dyan sa hanayin ng mga bansang yan, sa Latin America, aling karanasan yung mga pinaka-feeling mo na may parallelism sa context ng Pilipinas among all those countries?
Ang hirap sagutin yung tanong mo.
Mahirap ba?
Mahirap talaga. Dahil iba yung historical experience kasi.
Oo. Ganito na lang, Chibu. Alin yung sa karanasan nila ngayon na pwede nating mapulutan ng pinaka feeling mo na pinaka-importante na strategy
Siguro yung
for
binanggit ko,
what we need to do here now?
Partly Chile, I think. Well, first is yung unique yung nangyayari sa atin. Ang hirap. Sinusubukan kung ano yan pero may piraso dito, may piraso doon. No one country that can serve a model. Pwede nating i-adapt yung strategy of the millennials sa Chile of linking with the other groups. Their success in linking with labor, Indiana, and the women's movement, and the retirees. Kasi yung pension fund ng mga matatanda sa Chile, pati yung kinanani nito si Piñera, pina-privatize. So, worried yung ability nila to link with other groups. So, we don't have we have less in common with Venezuela and Bolivia dahil meron silang petroleum and rich in natural resources ang Bolivia. I haven't really kailangan pag-isipan. May mga pira-piraso. Yung style ng governance ng Zapatista in Mexico is really impressive. They internalized two practices. In Spanish, preguntar caminando, asking while you're walking, which means continuous consultation with your base. Gobernar obedeciendo, govern by obeying your base. They have these practices which are worth emulating. Like I said, may pira-piraso dahil iba-iba yung karanasan. Wala akong makitang isang particular country na pwede natin.
Ang isang point din is yung may binanggit ka kanina na at the time na napanghawakan nila at nagkaroon ng mga pink tide na mga governments. Pero at the same time yung konteksto nila na napakahina ng mga institutions nila. And dito sa Pilipinas, what we're looking at is exactly the same. Iba nga lang talagang outrightly neoliberal, capitalist, and even fascist. So sila merong nakita natin na progressive, left progressive naman yung mga governments na yon, and yet parehong sitwasyon na napakahina ng mga institutions kahit tayo ngayon, and continuously na sinisira at pinapahina yung institutions natin ngayon.
Yes.
And so in our situation na double whammy, hindi na nga progressive yung government mo, at the same time na humihina pa institutions mo.
Yeah.
Tapos kaya nga nakakadismaya minsan, may binabanggit ka, parang pwedeng tignan yung mga yung pagko-coalition ng mga sektor gaya ng kung sa mga millennials, mga youth na pwedeng mag-tie up o mag-link up dito sa mga iba, like yung sa women's women's movement at saka sa workers movement. Pero kahit na workers movement natin, how strong is it compared sa labor sa Latin America? And what are you talking about? Kahit organized labor natin dito, ang liit-liit lang, napakaliit lang na bahagi
This is also true in Latin America.
Okay. Sige.
Mahina,
So,
humina na talaga ng gusto ang labor movement.
At saka sa buong mundo yan.
Yeah.
Ang workers movement.
Itong contractualization, naku, grabe doon.
which is doon ako nako-confuse kasi hindi naman nako-confuse pero yung
Nagdidismaya.
nagdidismaya. Palaisipan kasi kung mahina rin doon and yet pinalakas nila yung kanilang political parties. So saan yung base ng political parties na yon? Ano yung base? You're saying na iba-iba like sa Bolivia, it's the indigenous people. Ganun ba yon? At
not necessarily. For instance, pagka sinabi ko indígena. Indígena also correlates to the pinakamahirap na sector ng economy ng country. Kung titignan mo, sino mga pinaka-pobre dyan sa mga bansang yan? Yung mga indígena. Sino yung workforce in Bolivia? Mga indígena. So, we're essentially about the same group.
Pero paano nga, Chibu, paano nilang na-strengthen yung kanilang political parties? So much so that they're able to, get into positions. Get into power.
Okay. Iba-iba rin, no? The cases of you have a charismatic leader. One, no? In the case of Chavez,
Edukasyon.
yung charisma, malakas na. Then you have yung, in the case of Bolivia, matagal na history na ang labor movement of political involvement. It's the most the miners are the most politicized. Working together in the mines. Tapos yung common cultural background that also helped organizing along ethnic lines, which is now being done expanded in Guatemala. You had negotiated settlement ng conflict noon in the 90s, pero walang visible gains from that settlement conflict. It was not the movement was not indígena-led. So ngayon, nag-iisip itong mga indígena, paano ito? Kami ang pinakamarami dito. Guatemala also has a indigenous majority. So the basis for uniting, magkakaiba-iba it's also sa akin problematic dahil hindi ko alam nung tinanong ni Raquel, ano pwedeng model? Hindi ko talaga masagot yun. Depende sa iba-ibang countries, iba-ibang
Pero mas ko sa Bolivia, ang isang napansin ko, di ba they raised the cultural level also, yung educational level ng mga indígena. Pinapasok nila sa schools talaga ang marami. Tiniyak nila yon na kaya sila ngayon may mga leader na mga kabataan na mga indígena pero pwede nang umupo sa mga konseho ng kaya nilang i-express ng sarili nila. Kasi massive talaga yung ginawa nilang pagpapapasok sa kanila sa mga schools of higher learning.
Ang babata. Kasi noon, bago nanalo ang NAS, education, health, napakababa ang priority yan sa budget. At saka yung racism, napaka-tindi ng racism sa Bolivia. Hindi pa ako Doon lang ako nakakita talaga ng napakatindi. Napakatindi. Yung mayor ng Cochabamba, na babae, na hindi nag-repeat. Itong alisin si Morales. No? Series of, so yung racism expressed itself by denying the indigenous population education. So, paano papakinabangan yung gusto yung lithium o yung tin o yung natural gas kung hindi kayo marunong mag-process? So you're still locked into selling primary products.
Yung mga ibang kasama natin dito sa conversation, baka may gusto naman kayong i-share, itanong.
Kayo, sila Weng, anong yung nakita nyo doon sa Latin America? Ano nakita nyo na? Alam mo, mahirap yung Cuba, ibang klase yung kaso ng Cuba. Ang magaling yung mga leader nila mag-adjust sa pagbabago ng sitwasyon. For instance, nung nandun ako, tinanong ko, anong panahon ang pinakamahirap sa inyo? Talagang hirapan kayo. Ang consistent answer, nung bumagsak yung Berlin Wall, nawala yung aming preferred treatment sa aming produktong asukal. So ano naging response nila, Pastor? Hindi dumarating ang pagkain sa i-available ang pagkain. Pumayag sila sa mag-cultivate ng mga private crops, mga campesino. Is that a return to capitalism? No, I don't think so. It's a measure designed to alleviate the conditions of Cuba. So nung kikita mo naman ang ito niya, gulay at saka prutas, makikita mo palengke. Hindi naman yung starvation makikita. Oo, kahalang bili. Pihira ko kumawag. Hindi ka rin gusto. Numpisa ng Cuba yung pabayaan mo yung mga kampesino magtanim at magbenta sila ng produkto nila. Pero ginabayan ng gobyerno. Organize kayo ng cooperatives para madali ang benta ng produkto nyo sa syudad. Tutulungan namin kayo pag-transport ng produkto nyo from farm to market. Mas creative lagi.
They have foresight. And they have this determination.
Natututo ng kaliwa.
Grabe.
Cora, baka pwede mong i-share, Cora, yung nag-attend tayo na dati ng tungkol dun sa yung COVID vaccine, di ba, ng Cuba. Yung dinidevelop nila. Would you like to share on that? Ay, naka-mute ka, Cora. Naka-mute ka.
Si Miel yung mas nakakasunod dun sa vaccine, yung Soberana vaccine. So, baka,
okay.
Oo. You were referring to yung webinar ba?
Oo. Kasi dun binigay yung update tungkol doon, di ba? So, ano na nangyayari doon. Kasi issue ngayon sa Pilipinas yung vaccine natin, di ba? Yung vaccine natin na galing China, tapos well, hindi naman tayo lahat na agree na, although of course nabangle nga yung supply natin supposedly from Pfizer.
Mahal-mahal naman.
Mahal. Totoo lang. Sa totoo lang. And pero we're not even considering yung as part noong COVAX, as part noong nung mga trials itong vaccine na dinidevelop ng Cuba.
Tsaka mas mura pa.
Mas mura eh. And they're already on their third phase ng trial.
Mas mahal yung gawa ng China. Mas mahal pa kaysa sa Pfizer.
Oh.
Talaga? Yung Sinovac?
Mas mahal.
Mas mahal.
Pinakamahal yung Moderna, pangalawa yung Sinovac.
Pinakamahal ang Moderna sa lahat.
Kami dito sa Canada, Pfizer.
Oo, can afford eh.
Nag-umpisa na actually with the health workers.
At saka, ang dami ng pinareserba ng gobyerno ng Canada. Sobra-sobra para sa population.
yan ang nakakatakot ko. Binili na ng mga advanced countries yung mga vaccines na may iwan para sa mga Pilipinas, yung mga pobreng bansa. Nasa huli tayo ng pila.
Pinilahan naman na yung AstraZeneca eh, maski nung hindi pa malinaw kung safe o kung ano. May kontrata na eh.
No.
So kung stalled yung from China natin, well, naalala ko lang kasi dahil nga dun sa webinar na Soberana. Oo.
Soberana at soberania ng Cuba.
Weng, bakit hindi nyo kontakin yung meron ako alam, may mga ilang Pilipino na nag-aaral sa Cuba, hindi natin imbitahin sila isang webinar.
May scholar na doon ng Cuba.
Hindi lang isa.
Sila Justin? Scholar ng Cuba?
Every year, merong mga bagong Pilipino doon sa Cuba. Hindi natin, yung mga nakatapos na mag-aaral sa Cuba, hindi natin i-imbitahin sa isang webinar.
Yung
actually,
dalawa.
iniimbita sila pero hindi dumadalaw eh.
Ganun ba? Natatakot na malaman sila na nag-aaral sa Cuba?
Di naman.
Para ma-share naman yung karanasan nila.
Di ba iniimbita natin sila?
Oo. Ang hindi lang natin nalaman kung may nakagraduate mula dun sa mga estudyante ni Congressman Rufus Rodriguez.
Pero na natapos, meron na ako na-meet eh.
Yun yung hindi na ako contact ng PhilCuba. Pero
ang sabi nila sa akin, nahihirapan sila dahil yung iba ang orientation ng yung sistema sa Cuba. More preventive rather than curing. Tapos yung mga gamot magkakaiba. Pero it's not that big a problem din daw. They can go surpass yung problem nila.
Public health.
Meron akong na-meet doon na dalawa nung 3 years ago.
yung iba dito.
Meron din ako na-meet doon nung nandala ko.
Raquel? Pwede kaya mag-organize tayo ng webinar. Imbitahin natin representatives ng iba-ibang grupo ng kaliwa.
Iba-ibang grupo ng kaliwa. Okay, yung the whole range, the whole rainbow.
Oo.
Okay.
Alam mo kung bakit ko binanggit yan? I saw it back.
Baka mangyari na naman yung nangyari nung soberanang yun.
Hindi. Sa umpisa agad sabihin na anong ground rules. Wala nitong patasan ng ihil, mga ganun. Nakita ko yan na for start, at least mag-usap tayo.
Ang daming umattend doon sa Soberana webinar. Di ba Raquel, ang daming umattend na mula sa kabila, sa bayan.
Oo.
Kaso, syempre, si Weng, may chinik siya. Kasi kiniklaim na si Kadudong daw ay chairman nila sa eh di yun yung ganun style.
Na hindi na dapat binabanggit sa mga webinar. I mean, hindi na dapat nire-raise yung mga ganun na mga. Pero, well, we'll have to accept na may mga ganun. Pero gaya ng sinabi ni Chibu, would the advantages of talking, of linking up, outweigh yung mga ganong. Kasi annoyances na lang yung mga ganon di ba? I mean, you can expect those things to happen, and para sa atin, we should rise above those things na ngayon. Sa tingin ko. And then pero ano ang pag-uusapan, Chibu, kung sakasakali?
What are the common problems ng ating bansa? How do you address it and how we will address it? Alam mo, kaya ko rin nabanggit yan, Raquel. Miski na wala na ako sa kulto, marami pa rin akong kaibigan doon. Yung iba nasa leadership positions pa. Kayang namatay si Fidel maaga. Mabata ko yan.
Fidel? Okay.
Nag-uusap kami ng miski na kasi miski na ngayon, marami rin nag-uusap pa rin kami. Kaibigan pa rin kami. We can agree to disagree on certain issues. But let's look for the commonality.
Certain people, some people, pwede mo naman kausapin.
Hindi lahat, pero mamili tayo. Pag-organize to webinar.
Mamimili talaga para naman din.
Ako, naggagawa ko yan. Member ako ng fraternity sa UP na. Ang mga miyembro na nakakalat. Akbayan, maraming akbayan, may ND. Pero branch kami, nag-uusap kami. Ano naman? At least hindi away. Baka may posibilidad mahanap natin yung ating commonality. From there, makapag-mas tayo. Yung ating relasyon with akbayan, for instance.
Pag-isipan natin.
Sayang eh. Iyon ang nakita kong ginawa nila sa Amerika Latina.
Sa Amerika?
Sa Amerika Latina.
Latin America.
Amerika Latina. Oo.
Sa Amerika, give up na.
Yun siguro yung
masyadong madaming balista yan. Ayaw magsuot
how to confront a common enemy. Yun siguro ang dapat na pag-usapan.
Hindi, yung ito kay Duterte, sila.
Sa una pa naman, nagkaadiga.
Hindi na nakipaglalandian ng
yun na nga, nakapaglandian sila eh.
Oo, patawarin na natin nun. Nagkamali sila. Ngayon, sila ngayon binabanata. Ano?
Ano tingin ng mga ibang, magsalita naman kayo mga kabataan dito. Anong tingin ninyo?
Puro thunders. Konversasyon ng mga thunders.
Nakakatuwa. Dapat nga, supposedly, hindi na kami masyado magsasalita nila. Cora, ako, dapat sila, ikaw lang mag-i-input ka lang, tapos, yung conversation dapat sana ay iikot na sa inyo nitong mga yung younger set natin dito. So, madinig naman namin kayo, Hans. Oo, madinig
hello
naman.
po. Nag-agree po ako dun sa sa idea po ni Sir Chibu na parang may at least point of contact man lang at the very least. Kasi doon naman talaga nagsisimula yung mga interaction. Kaya parang yun, kasi baka wala lang opportunities talaga para mag-usap. So possibly in one yung sa isang grupo po natin sa LNM, yun po siguro yung isang possible point of action na tutunguhin ng mga pag-reach out sa mga different segments of the left. Kasi at this point, especially lumalabas din yung idea na bawal na parang i-shut out na natin yung Liberal Party. So if ever that is an option, so we are, the left broadly construed is really left on our own. So parang kung magkakalaban-kalaban pa tayo, so ano na lang yung parang strength talaga natin kung without the Liberal Party, kung we're on our own, RARJ, so watak-watak pa. So parang mahina na talaga. So at least that is, I think, one step forward, yung pagpapalakas ng ating number. Although, ako, personally at this point, parang, although hindi ko pa shut down yung idea ng parang also coalescing with the Liberal Party. Kasi, if that is the only way, for me at this point in my thinking, pero that kasi yun yung ginagawa ng mga as the last resort, at least for say kung instructive man yung case ng US, yun yung ginawa nila. It's really when they at least Bernie Sanders, the more progressive wing ng Democratic Party, pinili pa rin nila si Biden, yung corporate wing ng Democrat versus Trump kasi for them, you are choosing an enemy. So for them, mas receptive si Biden sa kanilang mga demands versus Trump. So yun yung kanilang strategic na pagpuposisyon. So for me, I think that's instructive. So that's why I'm not closing entirely my doors, that option, trying to coalesce with the Liberal Party. If that is the only resort that we have para matalo talaga yung very right-wing authoritarian option. And for me, I'm picking that option because I'm thinking of not the politician but the marginalized communities na pwede pang maka-benefit sa coalition na yon rather than the politician itself. So parang the marginalized communities are better off with the Liberal Party rather than the enemy, having an enemy in Trump or in Duterte, for example.
Does the
So
Liberal Party Does the
no.
Liberal Party have a big mass base or a big organization in the communities or in do they have chapters?
In the Philippines, parang sila yung mas malapit sa left rather than say Duterte and all the right-wing people.
Meron akong mga kaibigan na nasa Liberal Party. I've noticed that they've gone into organizing din.
Right.
Lalo na sa kabataan. Ang
Right.
daming, ito si Kiko, smart. Nakuha niya lahat yung dating chair ng student council ng UP. Yun ang ginagamit niyang tuloy. And also, Hans, gusto ko lang ibanggit a similar occurrence sa Latin America. Itong one of the strongest social movements in Latin America, itong Movimiento Centera, the movement of the landless sa Brazil, no? Nung panahon ni Lula, hindi masyadong tinulungan ni Lula. In fact, there was more land distributed by yung predecessor niya, si Fernando Enrique Cardoso, than si Lula. But yet, the MSP continued to support Lula. Why? Precisely because of yung piso na ginamit. Mabuti na itong kay Lula na alam natin, kilala natin. Isa sa yung demonyo na hindi natin kilala. So hanggang sinusuportahan nila ng MSP. Ni Astudillo, itong Partido de Trabajo. We have more in common with them than sila Bulusan. Bulunaso, Bulusan. Ako, I would go. Nakausap ko yung mga liberal. Sige, tignan natin.
Oo. So it's still
alam mo, natuturin kasi meron, sino may ideya niya. Palagay ko nang galing sa UP. Tsaka meron sila mga events na ino-organize na designed to draw in mga bata.
Napunta sa election yung kwento natin.
Also, sir, yung may follow-up question pala ako. So, sinabi niyo po na may nagsimula na yung debate on what's the concrete form of socialism in the 21st century. Meron na po bang mga major points or at least major contours na sila nakikita na ito yung possible hindi na nag-work sa konteksto ng panahon ngayon? So, for example, I'm just thinking, na-realize na ba, mayroon na bang realization na parang capitalism or neoliberalism in itself is hindi na talaga siya pwede pa siyang i-transform pero hindi na siya mawawala in some form. Pa, and then pwede na lang i-roughen yung edges ng capitalism or ano na po ba yung form ng debate or ano na ba yung mga main insights na nagki-crystallize na in those debates?
Naku.
May mga consensus na ba?
Yun ang pinaplano ko, basahin yung nagkaling sa Venezuela na ginawa nito sila Lewinsky. Hindi pa ako.
Parang reforming capitalism
Imposible.
as a social system, no? Pag sinabi natin refine the edges,
Paano yun?
ayan, ng neoliberalism, reforming capitalism.
Well, ano natin explain yung mga social democratic formation? Since Scandinavia, social democratic practices na in-adapt rin sa Latin America, free education, healthcare. Is that polishing the rough edges of capitalism? No.
Or siguro mali po siguro yung phrase na ginamit ko, but I think parang even nagugulat lang ako even some radical intellectuals sa US, ang sinasabi nila ay at least some form of private market is pwede pa rin naman, pero
Oo,
parang ganon.
Yes.
Oo.
Yes.
Even in Cuba, there's private market, there's private enterprise.
Meron yung social, yung social sector. Alam mo sa mga land policies, may halo-halo. Meron, for instance, meron nagpo-push ng cooperative, state farm, land reform. Pero lahat under nung sabi na sila, yung land reform, ibang klase. Hindi mo pwede sabihin natin. Meron private, may state, may social sector, state assisted. Siguro meron may instances. Yung binanggit mo yun sa Cuba, yung return to cultivation of private plots. It's a temporary measure, but necessary to at least yung for the time of the crisis.
At saka kaibahan doon, empower yung nagdadala ng socialist road kaya kontrolado, kumbaga.
Hindi straight line towards socialism, medyo pagurba-gurba ng konti. But eventually, the end goal is socialism.
Whether that's siguro transition muna given the immediate crisis and then transition to a more I don't know. So
Pwede naman pagkaisahan ang transition, pero ang importante maging malinaw kung saan ang direksyon.
I think tayo na gawin na natin, hindi na pwede itong our goal is socialism.
Chibu, capitalism has been there for more than 300 years, and I think the series of capitalist crisis, pinakita na nun kung ano talaga yung epekto sa mamamayan. Marami na tayong nakita at pasama naman talaga ang nangyayari. ayun, importanteng tingnan na talaga kung ano ang social system that will serve humanity, na magpapalitaw ng kabutihan ng tao, hindi tulad nitong gerahan ng gerahan para sa tubo, di ba? Yung ganyan na yung nangyayari.
At saka mas tumitindi ang pag-exploit sa tao dito.
Yes. It has been shown by the...
Hindi lang proletariat, precariat na ngayon.
Wala na ngang wala na ngang...
At saka humina ng mga trade unions all over.
At saka yung mga existing, marami na silang kinurap doon. Ginawa ng part.
Lalo na sa atin.
Oo. Talagang we really have to change this system. Ngayon, kung ano yung mga paraan para doon, marami tayong, kumbaga, yung pa ang mga marami pang contours, maraming tatrabahuin. Ngayon, since nga kami matatanda na.
Ayun na yun. Sino magtatrabaho na nun?
Bata naman.
Ayun, dapat trabaho. Ang mga bata ay kailangan ng
Handover na.
Sir Chibu, Ms. Raquel, mayroon po, last na lang po na question. Natanong niyo po kasi kanina yung parang meron ba tayong may parallelism ba sa Philippines? Ang naisip ko lang po, kung may extractivism sa Latin America, meron naman tayo sa Pilipinas, not just in the mining, for example, although hindi ganun ka-prominent, pero may extractivism tayo in terms of yung OFW natin, yun yung ina-extract natin ng value. Sila yung nagdadala talaga ng keeping our economy afloat. Pero
that's a thought. I mean, that's a new angle of looking at it, na extractivist economy ang OFW.
Gusto ko
pero
yun.
parang ang nakikita ko pong parallelism din ay parang, for example, we also nakikita din natin na hindi siya sustainable kasi for example, nandun nga yung Saudi Arabia na extractivism, tas dependent siya sa world market. Yung OFW ngayon, especially sa COVID, it's really unsustainable din kasi kapag nagka-COVID lang, nawala na agad ng trabaho yung OFW, balik Pilipinas, tapos parang bagsak din sila sa So all these kinds of forms of development, sources of revenues are really unsustainable and highly vulnerable to the foreign market or to the world market.
Highly competitive.
Highly competitive din po.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, sa sinabi niyo po kanina ng diversification of the economy, baka yun din talaga yung isang path na pwedeng ma-explore. So parang...
Address yung kung ano yan. Kasi
Yes.
Hindi lang tayo. Most of Latin American countries now depend on remittances. No? Mexico in particular. Kasi yun ang safety valve nila that historically. No? But what happens when hindi na kailangan yung labor ng mga OFW? Which is happening now. I mean, for instance, bawal ang remittances to Venezuela or Cuba. Marami dyan yung mga guest workers, Turkey, Mexico. Dito, pinapauwi na. Contradictory policy ng mga developed countries towards OFWs. Gagamitin nila kung talagang kailangan nila. For instance, dito sa Canada, ang nag-harvest ng mga galing Mexico, galing Caribbean. Ngayong itong pandemic, hindi sila makapasok dito. Hindi sila pinapapasok. Kaya nagkakamahalan ng mga kalakan, mga gulay. Mahal din daw ang gulay sa atin. Paano yun? Hindi natin pwedeng forever aasahan yung OFW as a source of revenue. Tama yung sabi mo, it's a form of extractivism.
hindi talaga mawawalang, kumbaga, batayang prinsipyo yung pagiging, di ba, self-sustaining, yung self-reliant ng isang lugar, kailangan talagang gawin yun. Ngayon, hindi naman yun absolute na magagawa, pero talagang there should be some level of self-reliance lagi. So, papasok talaga yung importance ng diversification. Hindi talaga pwede mo, kung maginto ka, yung maasa ka lang sa ginto, o kung meron kang anumang mga natural resources na hindi yun, mga ma-extract, yun na lang. Talagang kailangan mag-diversify para anuman, kaya natin mag-survive at kaya natin kaya natin develop pa ng paunlarin ng gusto. Although there is already this, nakita na natin na talagang meron din so-called international division of labor, meron talagang mga bahagi na like some parts of the world are not favorable for agriculture. Some are not good for, di ba? May mga ganun-ganun kaibahan. So, mayroong mga specializations din. Pero somehow, kailangan pa rin mag-diversify. And I'm very happy with what is now happening, halimbawa dito sa dalawang nangunguna sa Cuba, at saka siyempre, nagsisikap din, sabi nila, sa road na yan, ang Venezuela. Ang Venezuela na dating may sakit ng pag-asa sa oil, at saka sa kanilang pagkarami-raming ginto, kung bakit ba naman sila ang inulan ng pagkarami-daming natural wealth, ano? Ngayon, meron na silang mga binubuhay na kakao, mga kakao, marami na silang mais, marami na, nakakatuwa din, maganda.
Yan ang isang bagay na kailangan natin talagang palakasin. Yung dapat tutukan yung issue of food security.
Food security.
Isang bagay na hindi ko nabanggit sa baling naging presentation ko, the importance of international solidarity. Itong yung kilusan sa Pakistan, ang bumubuhay dyan ngayon, largely because of international solidarity. Not just yung moral support, financial support.
Pakiulit, yung bumubuhay saan?
Sa Pakistan movement.
Okay.
Kasi itong problem is not a national problem, it's an international problem. The response will also involve the other countries. No one can come up against this.
Sir, paano po pinapakita yung international solidarity? In what concrete form po?
Well, okay. Itong isang pinakita ng United States na pangyayari sa Latin America, yung formation of regional alliances. Una siguro sa Latin. Kasi, lalo na yung Mercosur. Okay, iniipit nila ang Venezuela many commodities. Argentina, Peru, ibang countries, tumutulong para ma-available ang pagkain.
Especially food.
Affordable prices. Apart from ayaw ng US to display of independence kung how yung country. So, yung kahirapan sa Venezuela ay yung food supply nila na mitigate because of the other countries supplying them with cheap food, no? And not just food. Nung nag-strike ang one strike ito, engineer o yung mga oil workers sa Venezuela. Kinabutahin nila yung computer system. Ang bumuhay uli sa petroleum industry ng Venezuela. Hindi. Pinadala ni Lula mga inhinyero na Brazil para tulungan.
Padala din ng Iran, no?
Ngayon, Iran ang tumutulong sa Venezuela.
Mas lalo naman gagalaiti ang US. I think na we have to start wrapping up na kasi ano na we're running 3 hours na dito sa ating conversation. Parang napasarap tayo ng gusto at well, dito kasi sa Manila, it's already mag-aalauna na, malapit ng mag-alauna. So, paano ba yan? Yung mga ilan nandito, any last things that you would like to comment or what? Yung mga hindi pa nakapagsalita, meron ba pa bang gustong sabihin? O okay na tayo? Okay na, Angging? Let's have a part 2 daw. Naku, patay kang bata ka. Yung part 2 ba ay ganito pa rin? O iba na? Iba ng ano, I mean, build on this, pero move forward to something, have more millennials. Baka yung mga millennials mismong dadala ng millennials din dito, no?
Yung suggestion ko na imbitahin
yung suggestion mo din na sige, pag-isipan natin then I'll try to put together something along that. Tignan natin kung and then run it past you guys. Tignan natin kung anong maganda. And then magbigay din kayo ng mga ideya paano yun. Kasi yung sa idea ni Chibu is, parang start a conversation, start talking with lahat ng callers ng left progressive Pilipinas. But then we have to take care kung ano yung pag-uusapan at para hindi siya maging contentious, hindi siya masyado maging pataasan ng ere lang, pero magi talagang substantive na really sharing with each other. Kung ano tingin mo, ano tingin namin, yung ganon tipo.
Miski na-exchange lang ng views without the end view of converting the other person to winning.
Yes. So sige. Yung iba, okay, nag naman sa chat si Angging. Tin, okay ka na, Galil? So we can close this session. Cora, okay ka na rin?
Okay na. Actually,
okay na?
Maganda yung gusto kong talagang pag-isipan yung sinasabi ni Chibu, no? It's not easy, but it could be possible. Basta sincero ang mga taong haharap, no? Yung may ganon. But at this point, who would know who's sincere or not, no? Just to me, create the space, for people to be able to talk. Ganun siguro. Kasi kung ang concern sino ba yung mas merong say, no? Yun yung mahirap, no? From past experience, pagka sinisimulan ng isang bagay, particularly, when you organize something and then you invite, for example, invite people from Bayan or the Makabayan Block, at hindi sila kasama doon sa unang pag-uusap to set the parameters or to set the objective of the conversation, hindi talaga sila sasama.
Kung ganun siguro yung ang tawag nito, yung format niya, Cora. But if kung hindi naman representation by organization, hindi organizations yung ini-invite natin, like very targeted individuals na each of you would nominate na, ito imbitahin natin kasi kaibigan ko yan at nakakausap naman yan dito sa mga ganitong usapin. Baka pwedeng ganon as individuals. We like actually this BALINTATAW, itong space na ito, itong platform na ito, BALINTATAW, is more of like that eh. Hindi naman to organizations yung iniimbita natin na i-represent eh, but we're just talking as individuals dito. Nag-share tayo. Of course, lahat tayo merong pinanggagalingan. Meron tayong mga dala-dala diyan na mga na perspectives and mga organizations, but we're here respecting each other as individuals. So baka ganon yung gawin natin na basis sa pag-invite sa
Let's start
mga friends natin.
Let's start with yung mga personal friends natin.
Start with them.
Ako, may mga kaibigan ako, mga RA. Yung meron tayong pinikilala na soft RA.
Meron pala.
Galil.
Soft, medium rare and rare.
Ano yan?
Galil, you'll have to advise us then kasi kayong mga kabataan originally nagpa-set up nitong BALINTATAW. So, do you think it's feasible or it's acceptable dun sa sirkulo din ninyo ng mga
I mean, lagi naman bukas, and I see din yung value ng ganong klaseng conversation. Siguro yung reflection point ko din dito sa fragmentation of the left and yung kinakarap din ng present generation of young activists. Malaki yung role na gagampanan hindi lang ng mga yung sinasabi ng mga millennials, but also the generations of past. Paano ko ba sasabihin niya? Kasi sa akin, ang take ko dito sa issue na to, unless hindi i-recognize and heal or tend to the generational and also current traumas of both past and present that were caused by oppressive systems, structures, policies, even practices. And I'm saying this not only caused by dictatorial regimes, authoritarian regimes, but also guilty din dito ang left and the progressive movement. So unless hindi natin yun i-recognize and i-heal together, we heal as one.
Yeah.
And yun nga, yung wisdom from the older persons, yun daw yung politically correct term, older persons. And yung sinabi nyo kanina na kung maging daring and bold ang young generation now to confront these issues, I think that's how we move forward. Kasi kung ano mang mga attempts to start these conversations, and hindi ko alam kung saan siya papunta, kung unity ba na meaningful o united lang sa in name pero in practice hindi naman nangyayari. Kasi marami na nangyayari ng mga united actions in recent times, regardless of political colors and inclinations. Pero as to the question of naging meaningful ba yung mga ganong unities, that remains to be answered. Yung isang question na lagi kong binabalikan is yung ni-raise ni Walden way back senatorial elections 2016. Yung ni-raise na is it now the time to be more uniting or the time to be more discriminating? I mean, mas maingat ka dun sa pag-broaden in a sense na mas maraming negative implications yun sa movement in the long run. So yung mga reflections ko lang din dun sa mga nangyayari ngayon, I think it's incumbent upon us to start this conversation, and I don't think anyone would disagree with me, at least in the circles that I'm communicating with. Kasi may value, and kung hindi natin gagawin, then I don't see a bright future. Mahirap,
Yep.
pero dapat.
No?
Oh, mahirap pero dapat.
Ang game. Nagulat ko.
Eka, sorry. Oh, ano yun?
Very conservative yung fraternity ko. So, ang daming RA ngayon.
Ah?
Ano yan?
Ano yun?
Conservative yung fraternity ko sa UP. Pero ang daming RA. Well, madami ring iba.
Yeah.
So,
Meron nga kami.
nagkakausap kami.
May RA naman kami sa team. Dalawa. Oo.
Kaya nagkakausap kami. Nagkakainuman kami. Sige. Siguro, yeah, we start with yung personal natin na may tiwala sa atin at may tiwala rin tayo. Tapos, let's agree on a common agenda na huwag naman masyadong bigat masyadong. Kung gusto niya, mag-inuman muna tayo.
Kahit ako, may kausap, mga close friends ko pa rin naman, old friends, mga RA pa rin yung iba eh. Pero hindi naman kami nagpapalalim ng husto ng political standpoints kasi alam niyo yung ano, 'di ba? Yung you agree to coexist na lang. Kasi marami talaga kayong differences. Pero siguro I would like to point na lang siguro kung ganun nga yung isang pwedeng tunguhin kasi continuing conversations naman to eh.
Yeah, no.
Hindi naman siguro kailangang, pwede namang mag-usap lang tayo, kunyari, ganito, discussions on Latin America. Feeling ko naman, based dun sa karanasan natin before, merong mga spaces eh na may unities naman eh, may hindi nag-away eh. Pero, syempre, di ko alam with yung mga kasama natin sa like sa laban na masa, kung ano yung tingin nila dyan. Pero kung ganito lang naman, conversations, meron tayong mga selected na mga individuals na pwedeng open. Katulad ng sinasabi nyo na mahirap nga naman kung ilagay mo dyan yung bayan muna o yung pamunuan na ng ano. Kasi kapag hindi nga sila kasama dyan sa unang process, yung discussion ng process, hindi talaga yan sasama. Pero I think there are some individuals, lalo na itong mga young people, pwede naman, feeling ko pwede naman ata. Pwede, sige,
Well, we
kayo.
have to start somewhere.
Ako mas optimistic ako dun sa ano eh, yung mga mga kabataan, yung millennials. I'm more I think dahil siguro mas either wala silang baggage.
Unaligned.
Wala silang baggage o ano.
Konti ang baggage.
Konti ang baggage. Yung mga ganon, no?
Hindi kami mga damaged goods.
Hindi,
Ay, excuse me yung damage goods.
What a way to say it! I will remember that, damaged goods.
Napaubo tuloy ako. O, sige na. Goodbye. Good night na tayo. Ala,
Okay.
alam na.
Good morning sa akin.
Salamat tayo kay Chibu.
Si Chibu,
Ano?
alas 4 daw gumigising. So, pwede nating mas agahan yung oras.
Oo nga, mas agahan natin kung mas oo. Yun yung isang problema natin, yung time zone difference din.
Kung nasa hemisphere ko, miski na umaga, sige, pwede.
Okay.
Sige.
Ano
Oh,
oras na
salamat
dyan?
sa lahat.
I think
Okay.
it's almost 9 for Chibu.
Sa kanila.
Ayan, nagpakita na ako.
Oo, ngayon ka nagpakita.
Hirap ng signal eh. Nawawala ako.
Oo. Pagka binubuksan ng video, no, nawawala. Anyway, salamat sa lahat ng nakapunta dito ngayon. Mas i-prepare pa natin yung next na sinasabi na ni Chibu, and maybe kung may mga iba pa kayong ideas na ayusin siya, lang ipaabot lang kung ano yung mga ideas na yon. Paano nating mas mapapa-improve itong conversations na ito. Okay?
Okay,
So,
bye.
good night
Thank
and
you.
good
Salamat,
morning.
Chibu.
Good
Chibu,
morning.
maraming salamat ha.
Thank you.
Thank you po. Bye-bye. Salamat.
Thanks everyone.
Kita tayo pag gusto.
May sasabihin pa si Chibu?
Ha?
Akala ko may sinasabi ka pa.
Sabi ko pa.
Good night. Good night sa lahat.
Night.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Mukhang Pilcuba itong naiwan.
Di pa
Sa
ba kayo
21, meron pa tayo.
Kanina ko lang nalaman na sa 21 pala yung despedida. At
Talaga?
kahapon ko lang nalaman. Kasi nga, di ba, umalis ako dun sa Philcuba chat group.
Si Weng, kahapon ko din lang naman sinabi sa kanya.
Talaga? So wala pang announcement? Ano ba yan? Sino ba ang pupunta?
Sa?
Doon sa
Walang alam
despedida.
si Weng kung hindi pa nagtanong sa akin kahapon. Sabi ko,
Talaga?
magtanong ka na lang kay Gina. Hindi pala niya nakukontak si Gina.
Oo. Kahapon, nagtanong ako kay Gina, no? Nag-message ako. Tapos yun nga, sinabi niya na sa 21 daw. Anyway, tapos nga, ginagagawa ako ng poster. Kung sabi ko, pwede kong gawin, basta simple lang, hindi komplikado. Inantok na ako kagabi, kaya tapos kanina, puno naman yung oras na marami akong kailangan gawin. So, hindi ko pa nagawa.
Okay.
So,
may ano tayo ha? May mask na blokeyo, no? Sa opening.
Teka lang po, may klase po ba bukas?
Wala na. Kasi,
Wala na klase. Okay.
Oo,
January na.
So, wala na yon. Okay. Buti naman.
Okay. January na. Okay.
Sige. Ano yung
okay,
mask?
good
Ano
night.
yung mask na sinasabi mo? Saan natin kukunin yun?
Blokeyo, no? Parang ano lang, sa opening. Tapos tatanggalin natin ng sabay-sabay.
Paplasta lang sa face mask.
Gawin nyo na yung program. Hindi nga natin alam kung sino.
Tapos maghanda raw ng ng parang alak para tayo magto-toast.
Okay.
Toast too.
Parang anything goes lang siya, no?
Yun lang.
Hindi ko alam. So, I don't know.
Si Gina ang papatakbo ng program.
Oo, si Gina rin ang mag-host. So, I'm not hosting that session. So, hindi ko rin alam. No? Kaya, yung poster will not contain anything except yung date and despedida siguro, ganun lang. Saka mukhang hindi naman marami eh. Hindi naman marami
Ano
kasi
lang,
Friday na eh. Kailan ka pa mag-i-invite? So I don't think there will be a lot of people.
puro
Tapos,
lang labas siguro sa working group na nagwo-work.
Working
Sa working group na nagwo-work, no? Kasi may mga members ng working group na hindi nagwo-work. Sino pa ba yung may mga binanggit pa na i-try natin? I-try daw kung mapapapunta si Ferdy. Kung sino
Kasi-
pa ba ang pinangalanan?
siguro baka pumunta naman yung iba.
try mo kaya yung
Oo,
ibang guest.
tapos
Dahil aalis naman na. So, baka marami ring pumunta. But ano bang oras? Hindi ko na alala. Anong oras?
ayun, sabi ko nga si Presi, padadaluhin ko din, mga 3 rin siguro from us.
Anong
Si
oras
Gina,
ba?
ganun din.
Anong
Ha?
oras? Anong oras ba? Pala. Anong oras?
Hindi ko maalala kung anong oras.
Yun na nga eh. So, anyway, sinabi ko kay Gina, wag akong asahan na tumulong sa pag-invite. So it's oo. Kasi
Nag-attend pa sila ngayon ng yung picket. Global picket.
okay.
Baka lang po pwedeng suggestion yung mga in-invite na guest speakers. Baka pwede si Sonia at si Ferdy. Ganon.
Sige, tanungin natin.
Paki-remind, nako, Diyos ko, yung ating
Baka
token na gift, kailan ba yun ibibigay? Pwede ba? Pakiasikaso. Pakisabi naman, nakakahiya na doon sa mga speakers eh. Kung wala na talaga yung libro, magpa-book na lang. O kaya, bumili na lang ng para meron tayong konkretong naibigay na
Pwede naman nga
appreciate
ipa-clone yun. Kasi, di ba, pag foreign books naman,
oo.
di ba?
Yun yung huli kong suggestion kay Gina, no? Yung halimbawa, yung sa women, meron naman Revolution Within meron namang isa sa atin, may kopyang original, di ba? So, ipa-book alike na yon. O yung iba, baka pwedeng yung Fidel. So, meron namang original na Fidel si Kadudong. And it does not cost as much. Kaya lang kasi kung ang tagal na eh. Parang nakakahiya na talaga.
Kakahiya naman.
Kasi kahit na nung nag-i-invite tayo nung yung bang tawag? Thursday, ano ba yan?
Colloquium.
Nagbibigay tayo ng maliit na token. We don't miss that, kung ano man yung alam natin mahilig sa kape o mahilig sa alak or whatever. Nag-aabot tayo, but syempre siguro dahil online, so it's not so important to give anything, but it's not proper just to invite people and ask them to do something and prepare and not give anything. So, rin. Baka pwedeng paki-remind na lang. Kasi,
oo, maski man lang yung sa Revolution Within or Revolution ng Cuba.
Oo, yun. Kung masyadong makapal yung...
Kung di na nakikita ni Princess kung saan niya nilagay ang libro eh.
Meron ka bang original, Miel?
Meron.
Oo, kasi nga, 'di ba, bumibili nga ako dun sa yung naiwan, but I don't think mahanap pa kasi tinignan na raw ni Fe doon sa baka nasa likuran ng kotse. Sabi ko baka doon nalagay. Hindi naman
Meron akong libro kasi 'di ba, dahil pinagsalitaan nila ako, binigyan nila ako ng libre.
Yun, di original yun. So pwedeng ipa-book alike na yun. Kahit pare-pareho na sila. Naisip ko lang, oo, kasi kahit naman yung mga lalaki, pwede naman basahin nila tungkol sa women.
Oh, yes.
Oo.
Why not?
Para mas mura.
Sino yan? Si Gloriani, si Ferdy, si Sonia. Sino pa?
Tsaka mura-mura lang siguro yun.
Si
Pag
Ay,
yung
sorry
Fidel,
po.
mahal yun eh.
Dr. Butching. Oh,
Yung Fidel kasi,
oo.
ano yun, mga 500 plus dati eh. 580.
si Fema Ngas man lang. Hindi bali na yung mga member ng working group.
Oo.
Oo, so yung mga yun, it's baka pwedeng asikasuhin bago magpasko para yun na rin ang pamasko natin. 'Di ba?
Yun lang, baka medyo busy na yung mga si Taji mo.
Kaya makapagpak
Alin?
yung
20, ano na ngayon eh.
Sinong busy?
18.
Busy na. Hindi ko nga makausap yun.
Meron din kopya si ano eh. Pwede rin kasi sila may kotse. Ako wala kasi akong sasakyan eh. Pwedeng
Sino?
ipakopya ni Gina sa UP. Meron naman siyang kopya nun. Revolution.
Pwedeng ipagawa and then ipaano na LBC yung kay LBC yun. Kay Sonia. All the rest lalamove na o kaya Grab. Para hindi na tayo kailangan magbigay ng Christmas gift sa kanila. Yun na yun, yung Christmas na rin. Yun na rin ang thank you. Kasi
okay.
Nakakayang umulit eh. Baka follow up mo na lang. Baka ikaw, Tita paki-follow up na lang. Ilang beses na ako nagre-remind yan eh. Talagang.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, bye.